three numbers, three answers to one question, all from real data. They're 37 percentage points apart. 27% of American households are on track to cover all their retirement expenses, including the discretionary stuff. Travel, restaurants, gifts. 45% can cover at least the essentials. Housing, food, healthcare. 64% feel confident they'll have enough to live comfortably in retirement. These numbers all describe the US in 2026. They just measure the word ready three different ways. The first comes from Fidelity's Retirement Preparedness Measure. Number 2 uses that same Fidelity framework, expanded to households on track for essentials only. For the third, the source is the 2026 EVRI and Greenwald Retirement Confidence Survey, released April 21st of this year. 27 to 64, a 37-point gap. That's not a measurement error. That's where the actual planning work lives. Here's the thing. All three numbers are right. They just measure three different definitions of one word, ready. Mathematically ready by strict portfolio math. Functionally ready, meaning you can cover what you actually need. Feels ready, which depends on what you've been comparing yourself to. If you're in your 40s, 50s, or 60s, this matters more than any headline number ever will. You're either approaching retirement or already in it. The question, do I have enough, rarely gets a clean yes or no. It depends on which definition you're using, and which one you should be using. Today, the three definitions, the math behind each, what explains the gap, and what each one means for whether you're actually ready to retire right now. I'm Tom. This channel is about real personal finance for normal people. The kind that actually works, not the kind that sells you a course. No motivational fluff, no fantasy returns. Just what the math actually does over time. If that's what you came for, hit subscribe. Today, 3 answers to one of the most asked questions in personal finance, each anchored to data. Plus a way to figure out which definition matters for your situation. Definition 1. Mathematically ready. 27% of households. Mathematically ready means you have enough to cover at least 95% of your projected retirement expenses, including the discretionary stuff. The math runs your portfolio at a 4% sustainable withdrawal rate, plus Social Security, plus any pension income, all projected over a 30-year retirement under a conservative market scenario. Why 30 years? Because that's the safe assumption against the long tail of survival. If you retire at 67, average life expectancy says you live to mid-80s. But average means 50% of people die earlier and 50% live longer. Plan for the average and you have a coin flip chance of outliving the plan. Plan for 30 years and the chance of outliving the plan drops to single digits. Why below average market? Because retirement plans that work only in good markets don't work. A retirement that starts during a 2008-style downturn needs to survive that downturn. The math has to assume one. Fidelity uses what they call a significantly below average market scenario, which is roughly the bottom 10% of historical outcomes. Fidelity runs a system called the Retirement Preparedness Measure. It scores households on a 150-point scale. Dark green sits at 95 or higher. That means you're on track to cover most of your expenses even in a bad market. According to Fidelity, 27% of American households are in the dark green tier. The other 73% are not on track to fully cover what they're projected to spend. Here's the math behind that 27%. A single retiree spending $65,000 a year. Social Security pays $24,000, so the portfolio has to cover the other $41,000. At 4% withdrawal, that means about $1 million in invested assets. Higher spending shifts that up. Lower spending shifts it down. For a couple, the math shifts. A couple spending $90,000 with combined Social Security of $40,000 needs $50,000 from portfolio. That's a $1.25 million portfolio at 4%. A more modest couple spending $60,000 with combined Social Security of $30,000 needs only $750,000. The required portfolio is highly sensitive to both numbers. That's why two households with similar working year incomes can land in very different places. How does that match against actual savings? The Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finance's 2022 puts median retirement savings for the 55 to 64 age group at $185,000, To clear a 1 million threshold, you need to be in the top quartile of your age cohort. Vanguard's How America Saves 2026, released this past June, shows the 90th percentile of 401k balances for the 55 to 64 cohort sitting around 900,000. Only the top 10% gets to the strict math threshold on 401k balance alone. Most math strict ready households have a large portfolio, a defined benefit pension still paying, or both. The strict math definition is the one retirement calculators use because it's clean. 25 times your annual spending shortfall after guaranteed income equals required portfolio. That number doesn't bend. It doesn't accommodate emotional comfort or lifestyle flexibility. It just sits there, one number against another. For households not in the top quartile, this definition can feel punitive. Most people not in dark green didn't spend recklessly. The math is genuinely hard. A household earning median income of $83,000, contributing the median 401k deferral rate of 6.6% per Vanguard 2026, ends up well under the math strict threshold even after 30 years of consistent saving. The system mostly wasn't built to put median income households in the top quartile of retirement readiness. It was built to layer Social Security under whatever savings the household managed. Definition 2. Functionally ready. 45% of households. Functionally ready means you can cover essential expenses with high confidence even in a bad market, without necessarily covering all the discretionary stuff. What counts as essential? Housing costs. For paid-off owners, that's just property taxes, insurance, and upkeep. Food. Healthcare premiums and out-of-pocket costs, utilities, basic transportation, minimum insurance. What doesn't count? Vacations, frequent restaurants, second homes, expensive gifts, anything that would feel like a real lifestyle change if removed. Discretionary spending usually runs 25 to 40% of total household spending in retirement, depending on lifestyle. Per Fidelity's retirement preparedness measure, the green plus dark green categories combined cover 45% of American households. That's the 27% on track for everything, plus another 18% on track for essentials only. The remaining 55% aren't on track even for essentials in a below-average market. The math at this threshold is forgiving in 3 ways the strict math is not. Social Security covers a much bigger share of essentials than of total spending. The Social Security Administration's 2026 data puts the average retired worker benefit at $2,071 a month. Call it $24,800 a year. For a single household with $30,000 of essentials, that benefit covers more than 80% before any portfolio draw. Portfolio just funds the gap, maybe $5,000 to $15,000 a year. That's a small portfolio requirement. Home equity also matters here in a way it doesn't in strict math. Per Census ACS 2024, about half of households aged 65 and older own their home outright. No mortgage. For those households, housing essentials drop from the typical 30 to 35% of pre-retirement spending down to about 10%. Just property taxes, insurance, maintenance, that's it. The reduction shrinks required portfolio by 15 to 20%. Strict math doesn't always pick that up. Functional math does. Quick example. 2 retirees who match on paper. Age, Social Security benefit, portfolio size, all identical. Only one difference between them. One owns their home outright. The other still pays a mortgage of $1,500 a month. That mortgage adds $18,000 a year to required spending. $18,000 a year at 4% withdrawal means an extra $450,000 of required portfolio. 2 identical-looking households on the surface, $450,000 apart on the readiness scale, purely because of one paid-off house. Essentials-only spending is also more compressible in a downturn. A household covering essentials at 4% withdrawal in a normal market can compress to 3% in a bad market with modest lifestyle adjustments. Strict math typically assumes no compression because it treats all spending as fixed. Functional math acknowledges what retirees actually do, which is trim discretionary first. The result is that functionally ready covers almost twice as many households as math strict ready. A specific example, a couple with a paid-off home. Combined Social Security of $40,000, a portfolio of $200,000, guaranteed income $40,000, plus $8,000 a year from portfolio at 4%. Total $48,000 a year. Essential expenses in that paid-off house might run $35,000 to $40,000, so they're functionally ready. Their portfolio alone wouldn't qualify them as math strict ready under any calculator, but functionally they're fine. Definition 3. Feels ready. 64% of Americans. Feels ready is the self-reported confidence number. Surveys that ask people directly, are you confident you'll have enough money to live comfortably in retirement? The 2026 EBRI Retirement Confidence Survey, released April 21st of this year, surveyed 2,500 Americans aged 25 and older. Combined headline finding, 64% feel confident they'll have enough. Workers specifically, 61%. That's down 6 points from 67% in 2025, and it's the lowest worker confidence reading since 2017. Retirees specifically, 73%. Down 5 points from 78 last year. Both numbers dropped year over year. That's a useful data point on its own. Inflation, rising healthcare costs, household debt, policy uncertainty around Social Security and Medicare, all of it contributed to the decline. Even after the drop, Felt Ready still runs higher than strict math or functional. Felt Ready is also strongly correlated with one specific behavior, having a retirement plan with concrete numbers. Per Fidelity's 2026 State of Retirement Planning Study, 83% of Americans with a written plan feel confident about retiring. Among those without a plan, only 38% feel confident. A 45 percentage point swing. The plan changes the feeling, regardless of whether it changes the math. Confidence also varies sharply by generation. Per the same Fidelity 2026 study, Gen X workers, currently about 45 to 60, are the least confident generation. Nearly 2 in 5 aren't confident they'll retire when and how they want. Almost half anticipate scaling back spending at some point in retirement. The reason isn't that Gen X is mathematically worse off than boomers were at this age. It's that Gen X sits in the window where retirement has moved from abstract to near term. The math becomes harder to ignore. Why is Feels Ready higher than Math Ready in the aggregate? 3 structural reasons. People overweight Social Security as a sufficient income source. Per the EBRI 2026 survey, 87% of workers expect Social Security to be a source of retirement income. 36% expect it to be a major source. The actual numbers from retirees, 94% receive Social Security and 66% describe it as a major source. The gap between expecting Social Security to be a major source and actually needing it to be a major source is itself a confidence gap. People who haven't run the math may assume $24,000 a year from Social Security plus some portfolios enough. The strict math often shows it isn't. Inflation gets underweighted over a 30-year horizon. A retiree spending $50,000 today at 2% inflation will need $90,000 a year in nominal terms by age 90. Strict math accounts for this. The feel usually doesn't. People plan for the first year of retirement and assume the rest scales automatically through Social Security cost of living. Adjustments. Historically, those adjustments haven't fully kept pace with healthcare inflation specifically. Longevity gets underweighted too. The strict math typically assumes a 30-year retirement to be safe against the long tail of survival. The feel assumes the average. For someone retiring at 67, average remaining life expectancy per SSA 2023 period life tables is about 17 years for men and 20 for women. Planning to the average means a 50% chance of outliving the plan. The 37-point gap explained. 27% math strict ready, 64% feels ready. The gap between them isn't random. It clusters in specific demographic patterns. Take homeowners with paid-off houses. They're overrepresented in feels ready and underrepresented in math strict ready. Home equity feels like wealth, but it doesn't generate income to fund spending. A retiree with a paid-off $300,000 home and a $50,000 portfolio feels wealthier than the strict. Math credits them. In a sense, the feel is more accurate. The paid-off home reduces required spending by $10,000 to $15,000 a year compared to renting. Strict math doesn't always pick that up. The feel does. People close to retirement age are overrepresented in feels ready relative to math ready, compared with people in their 40s. A 55-year-old with $300,000 in 10 years to go feels closer to ready, than the math suggests. They're discounting future compounding. The math captures it, the feel underweights it. Households that have never run a structured projection often sit in felt ready without sitting in either math category. Per the EBRI 2026 survey, only 52% of workers have actually estimated how much income they'll need each month in retirement. The other 48% haven't. Of those who haven't, many still feel confident. Without the math, the feel can run too high or too low. Usually it runs too high. Hopes outrun spreadsheets when there aren't any spreadsheets. The reverse case also exists. About 1 in 5 Americans feel unready despite being on track mathematically. This group usually has high savings rates, substantial portfolios, and a tendency to compare themselves against the top 1% rather than the median. Fidelity's data shows that high savings households often score in the dark green category while reporting low confidence. The feel undershoots the math because the reference point is wrong, so the 37-point gap isn't one error. It's a collection of structural mismatches between how the math measures readiness and how people experience it. Some favors the math, felt ready people who are actually underprepared. Some favors the feel, felt unready people who are actually fine. The diagnostic work is figuring out which side of the gap you're on. Apply the 3 definitions to specific households. Margaret is 45 this year. Office manager in Ohio. Household income about $80,000. She saves 18% including her employer match. Currently has $80,000 in retirement accounts. The discipline isn't new. She's been on this trajectory since her late 20s. Project her trajectory at conservative 6% real returns and modest 2% real income growth. By age 67, 22 years from now, her portfolio lands between $750,000 and $1 million. Social Security at full retirement age 67 for an $80,000 earner runs about $30,000 a year. Combined sustainable income at 4% withdrawal, about $60,000 a year. Give or take $15,000 depending on returns. Now apply the 3 definitions. Target retirement spending of $50,000 a year, covering essentials and modest discretionary in a paid-off house. She's functionally ready. Target of $65,000, replacing about 80% of pre-tax income. She's marginally short on strict math. After 22 years of saving and tracking her progress quarterly, she likely feels ready either way. So Margaret's answer at 67 depends on which definition. Functionally, yes. Strictly, maybe. Feels, yes. 2 quick comparison cases. Carl and Linda, the retired couple in Pittsburgh from earlier videos, sit in all 3 categories. Combined Social Security of $42,000, plus rental income of $17,000 from their duplex, plus a small portfolio at 4% withdrawal that exceeds their essentials by a comfortable margin and approaches their full lifestyle. 3 definitions met. Helen, the retired librarian who claimed Social Security at 62, sits in functional yes and strict no. The early Social Security claim reduced her benefit. Her modest portfolio covers essentials in a paid-off small condo, but not the lifestyle she had at 60. 2 of 3 definitions met. The third would have required delaying the Social Security claim, or building a bigger portfolio before retirement. Pete, the Pennsylvania high school teacher, is currently 52. He isn't at any definition yet because he's still 15 years out, but his strict math threshold is calculable now. With his projected pension plus Social Security plus his current portfolio trajectory, Pete is on track for the functional category at 67 if the current pattern continues. To reach the strict math category, he'd need to add about $300,000 to his portfolio over 15 years. That's $20,000 a year in real terms, achievable. But it requires discipline. 3 numbers, 3 lenses. 1 question. 27% of Americans are on track to cover all their projected retirement expenses. 45% can cover the essentials. 64% feel confident they have enough. The 37-point gap between the first number and the third isn't a measurement error. It's where the actual planning work lives. Some people in that gap are overconfident and headed for trouble. Others are underconfident and have more flexibility than they realize. The diagnostic question is which one you are. For most viewers in your 40s, 50s, or 60s, your answer to "Am I ready?" depends on 3 things. What spending number you commit to, how much guaranteed income you'll have, which definition of ready you're using. Pick the spending number first, everything else builds from there. The income picture comes together. Then the readiness question gets a specific answer, not a generalized one. Once you have a specific answer, the next move follows naturally. If you're behind, you know how far. If you're ahead, you know by how much. Either way, the work has a shape. If this helped, hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.